Bava Batra Daf Kuf Mem Gimel Amud Aleph. Mind the words for meaning. Maxza Laahron, Maxza Lebniu. We see often that once an idea, once a thought is expressed in words, the words have a power of themselves. We'll see not only the Gemara, even in the legal system, a person puts words into a document, and now the courts and the lawyers battle to interpret the meaning of the document. They focus on the meaning of the words. They don't get a whole lot of psychologists in and say, what do you think this person had in his mind when he wrote this? They look at the words. What do the words mean? And we see that's how the Gemara is all based on that. Understanding peshat. Understanding peshat is a science. Understanding what a person's intention is an unreliable art. And so we don't look at situations. In our sugi at the moment, we're looking at a lot of cases where a person said something and the question is now, what exactly did he mean? We don't do a survey. What do people generally mean when they say that? We don't get the psychologists in. What do you think people mean when they say that? We look at the words, because once something has been put into words, the words have power. And it doesn't always help to say, but that's not what I meant. I'm sorry I offended you. I didn't mean to. Yeah, but the words are already out. The words are there, and the words have a power. The words have a koyach. And it's that way in communication, it's that way in documentation, it's that way in sforim, it's that way when you write a letter, it's that way even when you write a text. Once it's put into words, the words have a power of their own, and we'll understand beautifully today how meticulous the Gemara's method is of understanding the science of understanding what words mean. Because when you're looking at what the words are meaning, if I remember correctly, the Tel Zerov speaks about it somewhere, that you're looking at something deeper than the superficial intention. You look at something a person wrote and you said, what was your intent? Did you intend this? He says, no, I intended something else. But there's a deeper subconscious intention. And very often the accurate interpretation of the words reveals a deeper intention of the person, maybe even an intention he wasn't aware of himself. So if a person says something that insults another, and then he says, but my intention wasn't to insult you, well, maybe it was. Maybe deep down it was. Because if deep down you really honored that person, you wouldn't have used those words. Those words wouldn't have come out. And so we look at words as a way of understanding a person's deepest intention. It's not sufficient to ask them what they mean. That's only their superficial conscious awareness. The words sometimes reveal a much deeper subconscious awareness. That's why one has to study a person's words carefully, because they have a lot of meaning. One has to give a lot of credence to a person's words. The posuk that we base the learning on today is V'hayta la'Aharon u'levanav v'achlu b'makom kadosh. There's certain things that belong to Aaron and his sons, and they must be eaten in a holy place, and so on. We'll see from here what we learn. How the amalali dvitu, a man said to his wife, Nechasai lechu levanech. He might have said it just before he died. He might have said it at some other time. He says to his wife, my property will be split. It's for you and for your children. Omer Rav Yosef, says Rav Yosef, Kanta mechza. Even if there are 10 children, she gets a half. She doesn't get 1/11. He says, my property is for you and for your children, means a half for you and the other half to be shared by the children. V'omer Rav Yosef, mana amin Allah. And says Rav Yosef, and if you want to know where do I get this from, I get it from a brisa that we have in Yuma and other places. The Tanya Rebbe, Omer Rebbe says, V'hayta la'Aharon u'levanav, mechza la'Aharon u'mechza levanav. We take, for example, the lechem hapanim. There are 12 loaves of lechem hapanim that are divided among the Kohanim every week. We divide 10 of the 12. How much does the Kohen Gadol get? The Kohen Gadol gets 5. And the rest of the Kohanim share the other 5. Why? Because it says, V'hayta la'Aharon u'levanav. And from that, says Rav Yosef, I learn that whenever a person says, this is for you and for you, if the one you is a group of people, and the other you is a single person, it's still split 50-50, it's not split proportionately. Omelei Abaya, says Abaya, Rav Yosef Talmud, Bishlomo hatam Aharon bar chalukahu. It doesn't make sense. I understand the posuk, because in the posuk Aaron is a kohen. Lahachi parat be'rachmana lemishkal palga. If the Torah would have just said the lechem apanim is to be shared among the kohanim, then Aaron would have got a portion, a proportionate portion. Because he's a kohen. So the Torah comes and says, no, Aaron and Bonav, the Kohanim get and the Kohen Gadol gets separately. So I understand, says Abaya, I understand how Rebbe reads this posuk. But Isha, But I don't understand how you, Rav Yosef, extend this to apply to our situation of a man who divides his property among his wife and his children. Isha lav bat Yerusha, she would not ordinarily get anything. So why is he saying, I want you to have? He's adding her into the legacy. Normally she would get nothing, and he's saying, I want you to get something. But you can't prove from that he must mean proportionately, because he could have just said, my heirs. If he would have just said my heirs, she wouldn't have got anything. If the Torah would have said the Kohanim split the lechem aponim, the Kohen Gadol would have got proportionate. So the Torah says no, the Kohen Gadol gets a half. But that doesn't apply here. That's such a strong kasha. It's such a powerful kasha. Against Rav Yosef, you would be sure, as I learned this Gemara, I said to myself, there's no answer to that, because I had that kasha myself as you read it. How can the leap that Rav Yosef makes from the Brisa of Rebbe to our case is such an enormous leap that it just doesn't make sense. Clearly the halacha must be like Abaya. In addition, you remember we've learned that Abaya and Rava revolutionized the method of learning, and after Abaya and Rava we paskin like the later authorities, because Abaya and Rava introduced the idea of studying everybody's view, not just your own school of thought. Whereas until Abaya and Rava, everybody made sure they understood their Rebbe and their Rebbe's Rebbe, and they didn't worry about everything else. They focused all their attention on understanding their school of thought. Abai and Rava introduced a much more academic system. Study it all, and then reach your conclusion. So up until the time of Abai and Rava, we always passed them like the earlier authority, because everybody was just trying to understand what the people before them had said. Once Abai and Rava came, and we looked at the entire body of Jewish knowledge at that time, we started paskening like the later authorities. So here Abai is the later authority. We should certainly pasken like Abai. But the Gemara says, Eini. The Gemara says, I don't like, we don't really agree with Abai. Why not? So now I'm holding my breath. Okay. At least the Gemara's got a problem with Abaya. I'm not the only one who has a problem with Abaya. Not just with Abaya, but who has. I have a problem with Rav Yosef. Now the Gemara comes along and attacks Abaya. Why does it attack Abaya? There was such a case in Nardo, and Shmuel gave 50-50, half to the wife and half to the children. B'Tveria, and in Eretz Yisrael, in Tveria, there was exactly the same case. V'agbe Rabbi Yochanan, Palga. So you've got two cases where they paskin like Rav Yosef. But logic says Rav Yosef is wrong. Abaya challenges Rav Yosef, and the logic is with Abaya. And we just learned yesterday that we only look at authority when logic isn't working, because the logic is balanced. But here the logic is working. Abaya's got such a powerful kasha. And the Gemara doesn't answer his logic. The Gemara just says, but you know what? There was a case in Nardo and there was a case in Tveria. They paskin like Rav Yosef. How does Rav Yosef answer Abaya's question? We don't know. Why does Shmuel paskin that way in Nardo? We don't know. Why does Rabbi Yochanan paskin that way in Tveria? We don't know. And yet the Gemara says in the next Omid, Hilchas Kavase de Rav Yosef besoda inyanu mechza. On this case of mechza that we're talking about, the halacha is like Rav Yosef. The Gemara itself paskins, it doesn't even leave it to later authorities to make the decision. The Gemara says the halacha is like Rav Yosef. Although logic seems to be with Abaya, and we don't understand the logic of Rav Yosef. So I've struggled with this. Literally, I didn't sleep last night. How does this work? Why are we paskining like Rav Yosef? When Abaye has brought the logic against Rav Yosef, and nobody has challenged Abaye's logic. All we brought is two cases. But nobody tells us the reason for the cases. We have no reasoning here. We just have authority. Till I found early this morning this amazing issue around Girsaot in the Rambam, around one letter difference between two versions of the printing of the Rambam, and an amazing Raavad. Let's understand this. The Rambam paskins, like the Gemara says, Amar nechasai li ploni v'livni cholkin. Ploni notel mechza v'chol banav mechza. If a person says, my property should be divided against Chaim Yankel and my children, then Chaim Yankel gets 50% and all the children split the other 50%. And there's a case in the Gemara where a man said this to his wife, you and your children, and Rav Yosef says she gets 50% and they split 50%. Says the Rambam, fine. The Rambam's paskin is the Gemara says you have to paskin. No question with that. Our problem is on the Gemara that says Hilchas Kavate de Rav Yosef. Then in Halacha Vov, in the next Halacha, Amar li ploni ufloni v'livnei ploni. A person says, my property will go to so-and-so, and to so-and-so. I probably will go to Chaim, and it will go to Yankel, and it will go to the children of Shmerel. So Shmerel's got 5 children, and there's Chaim and there's Yankel. Noitlim b'nei ploni mechza, then all the b'nei ploni, the Shmerel's children get half, v'shnaim harishonim mechza, and the first 2 get half. That's how the Rambam reads in our case. Asks the Raavad, just leave the next piece. I've brought the other version of the Rambam and we'll come back to that. The Raavad asks the question, he says he just doesn't understand the Rambam because it would be fine if the wording was, look at the bold part in the Raavad, Aval imamal Reuven v'Shimon v'livnei Levi. If he said to Reuven and Shimon and to Bnei Levi, the sons of Levi, look at the wording carefully. If he would have said to Reuven and Shimon and to Levi, then I would understand the Rambam, because then he made Reuven and Shimon one group, uvnei Levi bichlal echad, and he made the children of Levi another group. Then I would have understood it. But if it says Amar ploni ufloni uvnei ploni, if the lamed only comes in the beginning, I want my property to go to Chaim and Yankel and the children of Shmerel. In that case, as the Raavad, I don't understand this division that the Rambam makes. It doesn't make sense at all. But what's interesting is, if you look back at the Rambam that I quoted, the first Rambam, that's exactly our version of the Rambam. Amal li ploni ufloni velivnei ploni, which is the Raavad says, if the Rambam would say that, it would be good. But the Rambam does say that. Yes, he says that in our version, but he doesn't say it in the Raavad's version. So there are 2 versions of the Rambam. Rabbi Zalman brings, this is the Venetian version of the Rambam, which is a very reliable version, is our version. And that's been the way it has been for a long time. So if the Raavad would have seen our version, he wouldn't have had a problem. The Raavad's whole problem is because the way he saw the Rambam printed was without that lamed. That was his problem. And it's true, the Magid Mishnah has that version as well, the Raavad, and that's why Rabbi Zalman says, I'm not sure that our version is reliable because it's not the Raavad's version, and it's not the Magid Mishnah's version. But I want to suggest to you it is the right version, because there's no other way to understand the Gemara. What this does is it explains, our version explains the Gemara. And if the Raavad would have seen our version of the Rambam, he wouldn't have had a problem. And it's in the Raavad's problem that you can understand the meaning of our Gemara. What do I mean by that? What does the Pasuk say? The Pasuk says, V'haita le'Aharon ulevanav. If the Pasuk would just have said, V'haita le'Aharon uvanav, then we would have said, why are you splitting it 50 to Aaron and 50 to the others? But it says, my property should be split to Aaron and to the children. That introduction of the lamed, of the second lamed, puts them into 2 categories. So when Abaya says, I don't understand, there it's very clear, because since Aaron is a subset of the Kohanim, if the Torah would just have said the Kohanim split the challahs, then Aaron would have got a proportionate amount. But since the Torah puts it this way, I understand that the Torah is telling me that Aaron gets more, but that doesn't apply in the case of the woman. But what is if Rav Yosef's reason is not what Abaya suggests? What if Rav Yosef's reason is the lamed? And what's the case that Rav Yosef is paskening? How de omala lidvitu nechasai lech ulevanech. It's to you and it's to your children. I learn from the Pasuk, I learn from the Brisa of Rebbe, that when you've got the double lamed, you split them into categories. Each lamed means a category. To you and to you, not to you and you. If I say I want the split between Chaim and Yankel, or Chaim, Yankel and Shmerel, then each gets a third. But if I say I want the split between Chaim and Yankel and Shmerel, then Yankel and Shmerel get 50% to share, and Chaim gets the 50% on his own. That lamed is what makes the categorization. So it would seem that gives a strong credence to the gears of the Rambam that we have. The gears of the Rambam, which is Amar ploni uploni velivnei ploni. Because with that girsa, it's true that's not the girsa of the Raavad, I get it. It's true it's not the girsa of the Maggid Mishnah, I get it. But it is the Venetian girsa, it is the girsa of the Migdal Oz. The Migdal Oz also has this version. So there are reliable sources for this version. And with this version, the Gemara makes sense. It's the only way I can read the Gemara and understand why we don't paskin like Abaya. It's the only way I can understand why Shmuel paskins like Rav Yosef. It's the only way I can understand why Rabbi Yochanan paskins like Rav Yosef. And if you look in the Rabbeinu Gershon, when he brings the case of Shmuel and so on, he says, in that case also, he actually mentions the word li. And then the Gemara says, "Hava uvde de omar la shchiv mera nichsi lach velivnech." That was actually the wording in those cases in the Hardor, in Tveria and the Hardor, was this belongs to you and to your children. Exactly the same wording as Rav Yosef is dealing with. So if I understand that the lamed is the critical thing that divides it into two categories, then I understand Rabbi Yochanan, I understand Shmuel, I understand Rav Yosef, I understand why the Gemara says on the next Daf Yomi, but for that, I have to learn the Rambam the way we've got it, the way the Venetian Girsa has it, the way the Migdal Oz has it. I can't learn the way the Rambam the way the Raavad has it, and the Raavad himself can't learn the Rambam that way. And it's interesting, the Maggid Mishnah says about the Raavad, because remember, the Maggid Mishnah has the other Girsa, not ours. And he says that he says in the Hasogas, Hu chiluk dak kechut ha'sa'ara. This distinction that the Raavad is making between there is a lamed and there isn't lamed is as thin as a hair's breadth. It's such fine reasoning. So the Maggid Mishnah says it's just too fine to even give credibility to. Well, it's too fine if you haven't seen the other girsa, but once you see there are two girsas, it makes an enormous difference. And it makes the whole sugya able to be understood. It makes the whole piece of Gemara able to be understood. And that's how you learn. It's from pieces of Gemara like this that you learn how to learn pshat, how to understand the meaning. We're trying to understand the meaning of this person who gave a gift to his wife and children, but it's the same methodology of understanding meaning in a posuk, of understanding meaning in a Mishnah, of understanding meaning in a Brisa, or in a piece of Gemara, or in a Rashi, or in the Tosfos, to look at the words so carefully that this lamed can make all the difference in interpretation. Because once an idea is put into words, once a halacha is put into words, once a psak is put into words, whether it's in writing or it's orally, the deep meaning is to be found in the words, not in the intention of the person. If you want to understand what energy really is emitted by this statement, we don't go into the superficial intention of the author. We go into the deep understanding of the words. And you'll see that that's very often with literary and artistic criticism. Very often the critic will give a meaning to a work of art, or a piece of literature, or a poem. And the artist will say, that's not what I had in mind at all. It's very nice, but that's not what I had in mind at all. And that doesn't cause the critic to say, oh, I'm sorry that I didn't realize that. No, the critic is still valid, because what the critic is saying, that's what the painting says. The critic is saying, that's what the poem says. I don't care what was in your intention. If you analyze, that's what's out in the world. This is what it means deep down. And as we said at the start, when you interpret it that way, you get to understand the deeper subconscious intention of the author, not just the superficial intention. This enables us to get to the very heart and spirit of a statement, of the articulation of an idea, whether in Torah or L'Avdil also in general studies.